Hello, this is Myrie Lane on the Buying Space channel. Today I'm reading from the Torah. I'm in Exodus. I'm in chapter 4. I'm at the end of chapter 4 and I'm breaking down the end of chapter 4 into several videos because the amount and impact of the information in this last part of chapter 4 is quite astounding. And actually, in the last video, I talked about Moses' development. And I'm going to recap starting with verse 21 because to understand the impact or the meaning or the purpose of God in this situation, or try to understand it. No one understands God's mind. But I'm going to start rereading in verse 21. And the Lord said to Moses, when thou goest, return to Egypt, regard well all the wonders which I have put in thy hand, and do them before Pharaoh. But I will harden his heart, and he will not let the people go. And then shalt say unto Pharaoh, Thus hath said the Lord, my son, my firstborn is Israel. And I said unto thee, Let my son go, that he may serve me, and refusest to let him go. So behold, I will slay thy son, thy firstborn. And as he was on his journey in the end, the Lord met him and sought to kill him. This is talking about Moses. God was trying to kill Moses. And then took Zipporah, a sharp instrument, and cut off the foreskin of her son, and cast it at his feet, and said, Surely a bridegroom of blood art thou to me. And then he withdrew from him, and she said, Bridegroom of blood, but only in the respect of the circumcision. Wow. So here we have God trying to kill Moses. Now, why in the world would God call Moses and then try to kill him on his journey back to Egypt? Moses could not lead the Hebrews if he was himself not obeying the law. He had an uncircumcised son, and God was serious about him following the law. And the covenant between God and Abraham that gave the promise of the promised land and the Levant and all of that was not done on a handshake. It was done at the time that God requested that everyone be circumcised. That was Abraham and all of his descendants. And some cultures back then circumcised when the young men were born. Some did it when they were 13. The Egyptians did that. And some did it right before marriage. And the Jews did it right as the child was young. That not at 13. There is a celebration called a bar mitzvah that the Jewish people have at 13 when boys become men. And but that's not the time of circumcision. Circumcision happens when they are young, infants, toddlers. Usually a bris is done, which is a circumcision ceremony, uh, when the child is before a year old. I actually don't know, current Jewish practices as far as this. There might be a shorter time frame than that. So here, Moses, who is supposed to lead the people out of slavery, out of Egypt, has an uncircumcised son. And that's why God was trying to kill him. And his wife, Zipporah, circumcised the son and threw the foreskin in front of Moses. And even though God was the one that spared Moses' life and allowed him redemption for not circumcising his son, his wife, Zipporah, was the one that saved his life from God killing him. So she was a very strong woman. And she is a heroine throughout this whole thing. And what really is stark to me, my entire childhood, I did not know about Moses' wife. She is not mentioned in Sunday school, or not any Sunday school I went to. And people should know about her, because if it hadn't been for her, Moses might not have survived exile. If it wasn't for her, Moses might have died in the desert. Moses might not have ever been called. And Moses might have been killed in the desert if his wife hadn't been such a strong woman. And very little is said about her. Now, there is talk later, and I'll cover that, when the Hebrews are in the desert after they've left Egypt, and Miriam and Aaron are upset about Moses' Ethiopian wife. And I don't believe this Midian woman, who is the daughter of a priest, was the wife that they were speaking of. Maybe Zipporah passed away and he had a second wife after she passed away that was Ethiopian. But Zipporah was not Ethiopian. She certainly was a woman of color. Moses was a man of color. Jesus was black. So, that's not questionable. But the difference between Midian and Ethiopian, they are different. And the Midians were descendants of Abram or Abraham. So they would have been of a different skin tone. And I don't know if Miriam was upset that this woman was out of faith or whether she was racist. And I'll talk about Miriam's downfall through her rebellion against Moses at a later time. That's later in Exodus. But Miriam was a hero up until the time that she started criticizing Moses for his wife and other things later on in the desert. But the whole scene here, and another thing is, God put forth a threat to Moses' son. He wasn't going to kill Moses' son for Moses' sin of not circumcising his son. But right before that, why I recapped in verse 21 and 22 about what Moses was supposed to say to Pharaoh. Here we have God preparing Moses to talk to Pharaoh. And he wants him to tell Pharaoh that Israel is his son. The laws were harsh in the Old Testament. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and evidently a son for a son. So God wanted to tell Pharaoh through Moses, Israel is my son. And if you don't free my son, your firstborn will die. So God was saying, my son is threatened. And Pharaoh's firstborn son's life was in danger. And Moses' son, he felt was in danger because he didn't want to circumcise him. His wife had to do it. So here we all see that there is a threat to someone's child, their firstborn, their son. And I don't know if Moses' son that wasn't circumcised was his firstborn. Probably not, but maybe. It doesn't say what the name of the son in this instance. So we have God showing Moses how precious his son is to him. We have God showing Moses that Israel is like a son to him and is precious to him. And he wants that communicated to Moses. And God wants Moses to know how Pharaoh might feel. Because he's going to have to convince Pharaoh to let his people go. And it's no small sacrifice. It's the right thing to do, but it's no small sacrifice on Pharaoh's part. And Pharaoh doesn't care that he's enslaving people. He looks at the slaves as an asset, which is horrible, but it's the truth. He doesn't look at them as people. But God is going to make this personal to him by taking away his own people, his most precious person, his firstborn son, his heir, the future Pharaoh of Egypt. It's pretty heavy. The Bible is an awesome book, and you should read it. Ash, I know that you all listen to me read it, but please read it on your own. There are things that, and I studied the Bible a lot when I was a child, and I even read portions of the Bible when I was an atheist to debate people. And I've always been interested in archaeology. So even when I was an atheist, I would study, I read a book about the Hittites. I would look at articles about archaeology in the Middle East. And I watched a documentary about the Noah's Ark on a mountain in Turkey. I never lost intellectual curiosity about historical events in the Middle East and that surrounded the Bible. And it's always been interesting to me. And I still, when I read the Bible, I see and find new things all the time. There's some things that they don't teach you in Sunday school. And I guess the circumcision scene would be one of them. So that's why we were never taught hardly anything about Noah's wife. Because how she had to be strong was very adult and unseemly. But she did what she needed to do as a wife. You all have a wonderful and blessed day. And Mother.